धीराधीर जनप्रियौ नियकरौ निर्मत्सरौ पूजितौ श्री चैतन्य कृपा भरौ भुवि भुव भारावहंतारकौ वंदे रूप सनातन रघुजुगौ श्री जीव गोपालकौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गानन तन परौ प्रेमामृतांबनिधि धीरा धीर जनप्रियौ प्रियकरौ निर्मत्सरौ पूजितौ नाना शास्त्र विचारणैक निपुणौ तद्धर्म संस्थापकौ लोकानां हितकारिणौ त्रिभुवने मन्नौ शरण्याकरौ नाना शास्त्र विचारणैक निपुणौ सद्धर्म संस्थापकौ लोकानां हितकारिणौ त्रिभुवने मन्नौ शरण्याकरौ राधा कृष्ण पदारविन्द भजनानंदेन मत्वालिकौ वंदे रूप सनातनौ रघुजुगौ श्री जीव गोपालकौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गानन तन परौ प्रेमामृतांबनिधि श्री चैतन्य कृपा भरौ भुवि भुव भारावहंतारकौ वंदे रूप सनातन रघुजुगौ श्री जीव गोपालकौ श्री गौरांग गुणानुवर्णन विधौ दध्यासमिद्धार्मितौ पापत्रापनिकृन्तनौ तनभितां गोविन्द गानामृतै श्री गौरांग गुणानुवर्णन विधौ दध्यासमिद्धार्मितौ पापत्रापनिकृन्तनौ तनभितां गोविन्द गानामृतै आनन्दाम्बुधिवर्धनैकनिपुणौ कैवल्यनिस्वार्थौ वन्दे रूप सनातनौ रघुजुगौ श्रीजीव गोपालकौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गानन तन परौ प्रेमामृतांबनिधि अक्वातो नमसे समण्डलपति शनि ददातु क्षम भूत्वा दीनगणेश करुणया कौपीन कंठाश्रितौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गानन तन परौ प्रेमामृतांबनिधि धीरा धीर जनप्रियौ Priyakarau Nirmasanau Pujitau Śrī Chaitanya Kripa Bharau Bhuvi Bhuva Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghujagam Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī Tanapano
Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Adunulambito Bujo Kanakabhatatu Sankirtanaya Pitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugadharma Palo Priyaro Karunabhataro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Gurudai Pushpavanto Chitro Sangdo Tamuno Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhayo Charano Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subalapriyo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye.
Guru Parampara ki jai, Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī ki jai, Sandarbha ki jai, Ananta Kota Vaishnavindi ki jai. Glorious devotees, thank you so much for attending another presentation on Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī's Sandarbhas. Today we will begin a overview of the Paramatma Sandarbha. We will just be touching upon highlights from the Paramatma Sandarbha in 3 or perhaps 4 discussions, and then proceeding on to the Krishna Sandarbha, which we will discuss in great depth. So let us get right into the heart of the matter here. The Puruṣas. Again, we go to the 8th Anucheta, which gives us the seed conception of the entirety of the Sandarbhas. In one feature, Sri Krishna exists as pure consciousness without any manifest characteristics and is referred to as Brahman in some portions of the Vedas. In another feature, he expands as the Puruṣa, who regulates the extrinsic potency Māyā by his many plenary portions. In yet another of his principal forms, he is Narayan, resplendent in the spiritual sky, Vaikuntha. May that Sri Krishna, the original complete absolute truth, Swayam Bhagavan, bestow love for himself on those who worship his lotus feet in this world. Again, this is Jiva Goswami's own presentation of the Vedānta verse from the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam. This verse is the primary verse upon which the first 3 Sandarbhas are based. Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvamyas jnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti subjite. So Jiva has given us some idea of the Bhagavan conception in the last Sandarbha, dealing specifically with Bhagavan, the Bhagavat Sandarbha. And in there, he also dealt with presenting the proper understanding in regards to the Brahman manifestation of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So now he dedicates an entire Sandarbha to the Paramatma manifestation. So this Paramatma manifestation of the absolute reality is more or less the common understanding of God within the world of man. So this understanding of Paramatma that will be presented by Bhagavan will put Paramatma in a proper light in relationship to the Supreme Absolute Reality. And that light is the Paramatma feature or manifestation of the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan Sri Krishna. That Paramatma manifestation is specifically a manifestation which deals with the creation, the maintenance, and the protection of the material manifestation. So first, some introductory words regarding the Paramatma Sandarbha in general, and then we will go into the details of today's discussion dealing with the ontology of Paramatma. So first, the overview. Bhagavan is the complete person, puruṣaṁ pūrṇam, who has his own eternal abode and liberated associates in the spiritual realm. He has real potencies inherent within his nature, all of which can be divided into three categories: intrinsic, antaraṅgā, intermediary, taṭasthā, and extrinsic, bahiraṅgā. Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī's unique contribution to Vedānta philosophy was to make this distinction explicit, which is a significant aid in understanding Bhagavan, the conscious living beings, the manifested cosmos, and the interrelation between them. This refinement in understanding is not commonly brought to light by Indian theists, who tend to conflate Bhagavan and Paramatma without differentiation. We'll continue with this introduction a little bit and then discuss Bhagavan's intrinsic potency manifests directly as his body, qualities, abode, associates, and activities. The limitless conscious living beings, both in the material as well as the trans-empirical realms, are manifestations of the intermediary potency, so called because they mediate between the intrinsic and extrinsic potencies. The phenomenal worlds, on the other hand, are manifestations of Bhagavan's potency. Although reality, taṭvā, is one only, it encompasses all three of the above-mentioned manifestations. They are not just theoretical concepts, but ontological realities. Bhagavan is ever present in his own abode and is engaged in his divine play with his devotees. He does not directly participate in the affairs of the phenomenal world. It is for this reason that Bhagavan expands as Paramatma, also called Purusa or Ishvara, for the evolution, sustenance, and dissolution of the phenomenal world. So again, we are given this understanding of the extraordinary contribution of Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī to, well, first of all, to Vaishnavism in general, and then of course, specifically to the Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan of the Gaudiya Vaishnav sect coming in the wake of the dispensation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these, as explained here, generally speaking, a deep distinction and understanding in tattva of the nature of Paramatma and Bhagavan is generally, the two are not, the distinctions are not clear within even the theists or those that believe in the personal conception of the supreme absolute truth. In the Indian culture, they see both the all-pervading Lord, Paramatma, and the Supreme Lord as the same manifestation of divinity. So Jiva Goswami's unique contribution of plumbing the depths of what's offered in the Bhagavata Purāṇa and churning that ocean of transcendental wisdom, bringing out clearly the distinctions is again one of the magnificent contribution that he has made to human society, and specifically to those desiring to engage in a turning of consciousness towards the Supreme. So the Paramatma manifestation of Bhagavan. Paramatma Sandarbha is an elaborate essay on the nature of Paramatma. The distinction between absolute reality's manifestations as Paramatma and Bhagavan is relatively unknown, even to those who study Vedānta. These two specific designations are often used synonymously to refer to a single aspect of the tattva. It was Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī's genius to clearly define them and enumerate their characteristics and functions in detail. There is no other work in the entire gamut of Indian theological and philosophical literature that throws light on this subject so lucidly. Paramatma is akin to what people usually conceive of as God, the creator and overseer of the cosmos, whereas Bhagavan is God in his supreme transcendence without reference to the phenomenal world, God in his own intrinsic being. Paramatma is the regulator of the intermediary potency, taṭasthā Shakti, and the extrinsic potency, bahiraṅgā Shakti, otherwise known as Māyā. He is qualified, visista, by these two potencies. These two potencies are distinct from the intrinsic potency of Bhagavan, known as the antaraṅgā or Swarup Shakti, and are to be understood as being directly under the jurisdiction of Paramatma, not Bhagavan. So it's imperative upon us to fully understand this distinction. And although the Paramatma manifestation of the Supreme Lord manifests the material cosmos, expands through his potency into the Jiva Shakti and the bahiraṅgā Shakti, what we call the Māyā Shakti, modes of material nature. Although the Paramatma feature directly is that aspect of the Supreme Lord which interacts with the material world, he also is distinct from it and not influenced by it. He's the supreme internal witness of the material manifestation, as opposed to Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who is truly only engaged in loving affairs with his eternal associates in the transcendental realm, having nothing whatsoever to do with the material manifestation. Even when he comes once in a day of Brahma, actually twice in the day of Brahma, Krishna and once as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in that same day of Brahma. Even though he does, he descends with, basically he brings his entire Vaikuntha atmosphere with him, along with all of his associates from that transcendental realm. So that is truly a distinctive descent of the Supreme Lord, although it is sometimes referred to as avatar. Technically speaking, it doesn't fall into the same category as the other avataric descents of divinity, which are coming through the agencies of the Shai Vishnus and all the various material universes. So let's take this bird's eye view of the Paramatma Sandarbha. The first section of the book delineates the ontology of Paramatma as a supreme witness, Kshetrajna, the animator of primordial nature, Purusa, and the regulator of the jivas and the gunas of Prakriti. Śrī Jīva lays bare the intrinsic characteristics of the Atma as a conscious integrated part of Paramatma, distinct from Prakriti, in the second part of the book. The third topic taken up by Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī is the nature and functioning of Māyā. This leads to a discussion of the evolution of the cosmos, which is of Māyā. He completes the book with an investigation into the prime subject of discussion in Srimad Bhagavatam, conclusively demonstrating that it is none other than Sri Bhagavan. So 4 basic divisions of the Paramatma Sandarbha are there. The first dealing with the ontology of Paramatma, what is the nature of Paramatma. Second, dealing with the ontology of the expansions of Paramatma, the Jiva Shakti, the ontology of the Jiva. The third topic is the bahiraṅgā Shakti, commonly known as the Māyā Shakti, which is the extrinsic potency of the Paramatma, or matter, both in its gross and subtle nature. And then he concludes the book, this Paramatma Sandarbha, by looking to the Bhagavat, Srimad Bhagavatam, and saying, although all these things are delineated and discussed in the Bhagavat Purāṇa, we must understand that the main subject of the Bhagavat Purāṇa is the ashraya, the shelter of all these subjects, which is full disclosure of the Supreme Lord and an appreciation for the loving relationships that can be had with that Supreme Personality. That is, of course, conclusion of the Paramatma Sandarbha and an excellent entrance into the subject of Krishna, which is the next Sandarbha, the Krishna Sandarbha. So we've talked about Bhagavan, Jiva's presented in the Bhagavata Sandarbha, talked about the Brahman manifestation, which is that non-distinctive way of viewing spiritual spirit, the Advaitin viewpoint, without qualification, then the qualified Bhagavan, and then the specific in relationship to the material manifestation, the Paramatma, and then we will go on to finish the Sambandha section of Jiva Goswami's Sandarbha presentation with a very, very in-depth analysis of Krishna, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. That then becomes the focus sloka for Jiva Goswami, and he completely expands that so that we understand that this is the topmost manifestation of divinity, Lord Sri Krishna, and the topmost manifestation of his abode is Goloka. So the first Anuchetas deal with ontology of Paramatma. Being the source and shelter of the jiva, or taṭasthā Shakti, Paramatma is the interior regulator of all living beings. He is thus known as the supreme witness, Kshetrajna, of the fields of action. Kshetrajna means one who knows the presentational field of the body and the environment in which it participates. Although the jiva is also a limited knower, although the jiva is a limited knower, Kshetrajna, of the individual field of his own body, his knowing capacity is not independent of Paramatma, because he is but a part of his taṭasthā Shakti. Paramatma is thus the primary reference of the world Kshetrajna. Of the word Kshetrajna. Continues. According to Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī, there are three manifestations of Paramatma: the metacosmic, the macrocosmic, and the microcosmic. These three manifestations of Paramatma are also known as Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, respectively, who, along with Vasudeva, are called Chaturvyuha. Paramatma, also called Purusa, can be further characterized in two ways, namely as self-endowed with differentiated portions, vibhinamsa, called jivas, and is endowed with plenary expansions, swamsa, called avatars. An avatar has divine powers and the intrinsic self-identity of being God. Avatars are primarily of two types: guna avatars and lila avatars. So this, again, is an overview of Paramatma. Then the next Anuchetas, from 19 to 47, will deal with the ontology of the jiva. Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī begins with a detailed analysis of the intrinsic characteristics of the pure self, the Atma. What is the Atma? Independent of the impressions coming upon the Atma and the identification of the Atma with the external potency, who is under the jurisdiction of Paramatma and presents the Vedantic position of inconceivable oneness within distinction, achinta, beta, abode. This understanding is essential to the path of bhakti yoga, the prescribed method in Bhagavata Purāṇa. Why is it essential? Well, if we think we're God and alike in every way, what need is there for bhakti? There truly is none. Of course, this is the ultimate of the Advaitin conception of the supreme absolute truth, that in the ultimate issue, we are all of the same spiritual substance. Yes, but that's only part of the story. That's a partial understanding. We are part of the same substance. We are an infinitesimal part, and there is a supreme absolute part, which is the whole, which is the Supreme Lord in all his glory. So understanding our finite position and Lord's position, and therefore our subordination to him leads us to a consciousness and awareness that allows for the development of a proper dedication to his ultimate pleasure. And of course, being his integrated part, that is truly the best source for our own self-satisfaction and enjoyment. And then a large portion of the Paramatma Sandarbha is dealing with the ontology of Māyā, the bahiraṅgā Shakti. Next thing, extrinsic potency, bahiraṅgā Shakti, called Māyā, real potency of Paramatma, through which Paramatma conducts the function of creation, sustenance, and dissolution. Māyā has two divisions: the instrumental or efficient aspect, nimitta, known as Jiva Māyā, and the constituent or material aspect, upadana, known as guna Māyā. With its two divisions, Māyā operates like a modern-day manufacturing company that uses the media to advertise its products, generating desires in the minds of consumers, and then makes those available in the market. Then to the final concluding part of this wonderful Paramatma Sandarbha. In the final 6 Anuchetas, Śrī Jīva demonstrates that the subject of Srimad Bhagavata Purāṇa is Bhagavan. Śrī Jīva concludes his treatise by stating that the explanation of the famous Vedānta verse of Bhagavata Purāṇa that began in Tattva Sandarbha has now been completed. Among the 4 Sandarbhas that delineate the knowledge of Sambandha, Paramatma Sandarbha is the most important because it analyzes the nature of the self and its conditioning by Māyā. We have to begin where we stand at present. Without this knowledge, we cannot know in which direction to move, even if we are clear about the destination. So we must have some knowledge of how we are being influenced by Paramatma's extrinsic potency, Māyā. And once we know and have some detailed knowledge of the functioning of that potency, then we can realize the bewildering nature that it has upon us and we can seek shelter of a superior aspect of the Supreme Lord, his Swarup Shakti, hoping to be relieved of that influence. That turning of consciousness is the bhakti that has been spoken of and is the primary objective of this entire presentation of the Sandarbhas, to effectuate that turning of consciousness. So that is initially accomplished by an understanding of the nature of what that aspect of the Supreme Lord, which is currently influencing our consciousness, because we are conscious beings and we are influenced by our environment. A little summary of what's in the entirety of the Paramatma Sandarbha. Again, I remind you that we are just doing an overview, that this subject matter is extremely deep and penetrating and foundational to devotional practice and to a complete absorption in the message of the Bhagavata Purāņa, which is the prime praman or evidence as to the nature of spirituality that is available in human society. So this in-depth study as presented by Jīva Gosvāmī is extremely important to all Gaudiya Vaishnavas to have this fundamental understanding. We may not have time to ourselves enter deeply into this study, although hopefully at some point in our lives we will have the time and the facility to do so. But if not, at least having the appreciation of what Jīva Gosvāmī did and how valuable his contribution is greatly beneficial to our spiritual progress. This knowledge is so fundamental, foundational to Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan, as is all the contributions of the seminal acharyas, the foundational acharyas coming from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Goswamis, Vishwanath, Baladev Vidyabhushan, and all the others who were there initially and codified the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so that his dispensation could be fully appreciated in human society. This is very specific. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's descent came to give a very specific contribution. Golokare Premadan Harinam Sankirtan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Harinam Sankirtan is giving to the world the highest conception above artha, dharma, kama, and even moksha. This true purushartha, this fifth purushartha, prem purushartha, prem bhakti. So the essential points here. Essential, the difference between the Paramatma and Bhagavan manifestations of tattva, or the supreme absolute truth. The three primary manifestations of Paramatma and their functions. The role of the three guna avatars and their relative positions. The difference between the terms jiva and atma. The inherent nature of the atma. Maya and its various functions, the relationship between Maya and the jiva, the mystery behind the bondage and release of the jiva, the dynamics involved in the evolution of the cosmos, examination of the nature of the world as real or unreal, the intent behind the acts of creation, sustenance, and dissolution of the cosmos, the question as to why God does not relieve the suffering of humanity, the unbiased nature of God. So these are the primary and essential points that are presented in this Paramatma Sandarbha. And now we will enter in directly into the text. Our discussion will primarily focus on the second Anucheta. So we will first go through the first. Now Paramatma, this is what Jiva has written in his Sandarbha, in the first Anucheta, will be explained. Paramatma is said to be that feature of Bhagavan that pertains specifically to the cosmos. It is said in the Gita Upanishad, this body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, Kshetra, and the one who knows it is called the knower of the field, Kshetrajna, by those who have directly intuited both the field and its knower. O Bharat, know me also to be the Kshetrajna situated in all Kshetras whatsoever. In my view, knowledge of the field and of both these knowers of the field is what is meant by true knowledge. Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, the first and second text. And in all fields whatsoever, you should know me also to be the Kshetrajna. I am not like the Jiva, whose knowledge is restricted only to its own individual field. This is the intended meaning. This alone is the intended meaning of the statement. Sri Krishna concludes by saying that such knowledge is easily attainable if pursued along with devotion. Again, from the same 13th chapter, Krishna instructs Arjuna, in this way, the field, Kshetra, knowledge, Gyan, and the knowable, Jnana, have been described in brief. Knowing this, my devotee attains my nature. Therefore, in this verse of the Gita, only the knower of the individual field, Vyasti Kshetrajna, is identified as the devotee, whereas the knower of the aggregate of all fields, Samasti Kshetrajna, is the substantive reality to be known, Jnana. So what Jiva Goswāmī is pointing out here, which will come to a fine point as we go forward, is the fact that the true knower of the field and understander of knowledge, true knowledge, is Krishna's devotee. Unless you see the field of activity in relationship to this understanding of Krishna being the supreme Samasti Kshetrajna, the knower of all fields, and that all fields are coming from him, unless you have that knowledge, you're not truly in knowledge. This 13th chapter of the Gita began with, this is what Krishna considers to be knowledge. If you know this, then you're in knowledge. Well, if you know this, then you are his devotee. To have this understanding and appreciation of this knowledge is what it means to be a devotee. To know the source of the material manifestation, that personality who pervades the material manifestation, and that source for your own, from whom you get the capacity to observe the field of activity which he has created for you, that constitutes real understanding. Jiva Goswāmī continues, the manifestation of the Paramatma feature of Bhagavan is also indicated by the personified Shrutis. I must mention at this point that, again, this first Anucheta is an extremely elaborate presentation from which I have only taken some very small key points. So from the 87th chapter, the prayers of the personified Vedas of the 10th canto. O Eternal One, you Paramatma, from whom all these jivas have come, being their cause, pervade them unrestrictedly, completely. Thus you are their regulator. According to this understanding, Paramatma is to be known as that partial form of Bhagavan who possesses special potency and from whom the living entities appear. As is said in the Gita, I pervade and support this entire cosmos by a single fraction of my power. When it is said that Paramatma appears as the Purusha due to the limiting adjunct of Maya, it is in a figurative sense only. So again, just so that we keep everything in perspective, although Paramatma pervades and has complete awareness of everything within the material manifestation through his three different forms, metacosmic, macrocosmic, microcosmic. Although he is in this supreme observing position, he is not affected by Maya himself, although you would think he would be as deeply as he is involved in its creatance, maintenance, and dissolution. Now we come on to the second Anucheta. And here we get into a deep understanding of the distinction between Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, Narayan and Vaikuntha, and the Paramatma manifestation. And I believe it's important for us to keep this in perspective. If we remember Sri Brahma's prayers from the 14th chapter of the 10th canto, Brahma Vimohan Leela, where he came to some understanding of the nature of Krishna's unlimited potencies. Now, this is the founder of our sampradaya, the great-great-grandsire of from which we have acquired spiritual knowledge. And his conclusion, after observing Krishna's potency, was that others may think that they understand, and they may even say that they understand God. They understand you. But from my perspective and what I have just experienced, I can say conclusively that I have no deep and meaningful understanding of the unlimited nature of your potencies. Such a profound statement from Lord Brahma. So similarly, in looking at what's going to be presented here by Jiva. He's going to take and utilize something that Brahma himself presented in his Samhita as far as a theistic conclusions regarding the nature of the Supreme. His Brahma Samhita, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally brought into the Sampradaya as a significant text. Personally, he got this during his tour. And he, although there was only one chapter, it became very foundational to an understanding of the nature of this topmost manifestation of divinity. Govindam adi puruṣaṁ tamaham bhajami. That this is the worshipable object of our sampradaya. So we're going to get here a glimpse of some very deep philosophical understanding coming from Jiva. I will do my best to convey it. And I wanted to bring here, before we dive deeply into it, I wanted to make the point that although we are utilizing our intellect and our mind to try to grasp some understanding of the various potencies and expansions of the Supreme Lord, truly, this is just an indicator. And that brings us into the primary understanding that we're going to make here. This indicator, this idea, linga. So from the second Anucheta, as before, as in the case of Bhagavan, the prerequisite for his Paramatma's manifestation should be understood as bhakti alone. Whoa, okay. So now Jiva's just gone and said it, hasn't he? That the Lord manifests as Paramatma simply in order to facilitate bhakti, or a turning of consciousness, awareness, and full loving relationship to him. That manifestation is threefold, as said in the Naradiya Tantra. Bhagavan Vishnu has three forms, each called the Purusha, or the immanent self. The first, Mahavishnu, is he who sets in motion the total material energy, Mahatattva. The second, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, who is situated in the egg-like or womb-like universe. The third is Kshirodakshai Vishnu, who is immanent within the heart of every living being. He who intuitively knows these three is liberated from conditional existence. Bhagavan Vishnu is also known as Sankarshan and Mahavishnu, as found in Brahma Samhita. The effulgent, eternal Bhagavan Sambhu, Vasudev, or Mahanarayan, the Lord of Vaikuntha, is his, Krishna's, causal agent, linga, in the matter of generating the world. And Mahavishnu Sankarshan, the Lord of the cosmos, appeared within that causal agency, linga. Brahma Samhita 5.8.10. Jiva unpacks that a little for us. It is necessary to explain the word linga from Brahma Samhita, cited above. In accordance with the Vishnu Purana statement, this entire cosmic energy is situated in a 1/100 millionth part of his part. The pronoun his refers to the supreme form of Bhagavan, Śrī Govinda, and the potency to manifest the Purusha avatars belongs to him alone. A special part of that causal potency of Śrī Govinda is known as Sambhu, Vasudeva, or Mahanarayan, who is called the causal agent linga, comparable to that causal potency linga, because he is the agency through which the Purusha avatars appear. In other words, the term linga denoting a portion of Śrī Govinda is the basis of the primary meaning of the word Sambhu. Linga thus refers to a special portion of Bhagavan alone, as understood from the above context. There's a lot to be unpacked here. And in order to do full justice to this subject, justice, or give it the full explanation that it deserves, I don't want to enter into this in-depth discussion in the short time that we have left today. So I'm going to leave this in-depth understanding and unpacking to our next discussion, so that we can give it the full concentrated attention and devotion that it warrants. That said, just as a preview, it's important to understand what Jiva has just given us here. Just this by way of introduction through his Anucheta itself, he's pointed out that this aspect, this Paramatma aspect that is manifested through the agency of his expansion as Narayan in Vaikuntha is, well, let's read it again. From the Vishnu Purana, this entire cosmic energy is situated in a 100 millionth part of his part. What's being brought out here from the Brahma Samhita, from Brahma's prayers, is just how in comparison to the Lord's internal potency and manifestation of Swarup Shakti, this aspect that results in the manifestation of the Puruṣas, all three of these aspects of the Paramatma feature of divinity is it's not that it's not significant, but it's practically infinitesimal in comparison to Govinda in his transcendental realm. So it kind of puts things in a perspective that Bhagavan Śrī Krishna, his potency, that from which all this is coming, is so overly whelming. Just as Brahma said, others can say they may know, but from my perspective, after being schooled by Krishna himself, still in his young, at the end of his Kumara age, in his earthly Leela, I could say, I really, I may be able to create the universe, but what I've just experienced about these unlimited potencies and how the Lord can expand himself and expand into all of his associates because he knows and loves them so well. It's overwhelming, because then he showed me that all of the various Vishnu manifestations in all the various universes are coming ultimately through him. But they're coming in a specific way, which is what we're going to unpack in the next discussion. The specifics about how Paramatma is coming through Narayan and Vaikuntha. It's going to give us some small insight, some much appreciated insight from the Gaudiya perspective as to this deep understanding of Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, the first expansions, the second expansions, the expansions is coming into the material universe, and Narayan being that causal agent, that linga through which Bhagavan Śrī Krishna, Lord Govinda, brings forth the material universe. So I will conclude with that today. I want to thank you so much for your association and for giving me some small portion of your time and nourishing my spiritual understanding by your attentive hearing. If anyone has any questions, we can attempt to answer them to the best of our capacity. And if not, I offer you my sincere respects. Vanchakalpatubhyascha, kripasindubheva-cha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.
Nirmasaram pujito bhuvi bhuva bharavahantarakam Vande rupa sanatana raghujagam Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī